Do you know ball?
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 Do you know ball? Episode number 50. Welcome back, everybody. Today we have a special guest on today. He's got a vast amount of experience in the sports industry, and he also has his own podcast, Sports with Friends. Our special guest today, Mr. Seth Everett. Say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
How's it going? How's it going? So, Seth, we just want to jump straight into things and just figure
Okay.
out just what you did in the past, just to let everybody know, and how you got started in the sports world.
Started in the sports world. Well, I went to school for it. I went to a little place called Syracuse University. And when I was there, sports was this massive tradition. Back then it was Marv Albert and Dick Stockton and Ted Koppel was a famous person, Bob Costas. And then, now there's the next generation of Mike Tirico and Ian Eagle and Sean McDonough and those guys. So I wasn't obsessed with sports. That wasn't my thing. I got there because of what I thought was the challenge of it. It was to live up to this great competition. And don't forget, in the '90s, sports radio was massive, and just the idea of getting into sports radio, kind of on the ground floor was fascinating to me. Everybody in my class was going for play-by-play, and one summer I got a job calling New York 10 League games for the Auburn team. And as much as I had a blast, I had so much fun that summer. I learned right then and there I didn't like play-by-play. And once it did, it changed the trajectory of my career because I was able to go for jobs that were on higher levels because I was not trying to call them. So I got a gig doing minor league hockey in Syracuse, but then I wound up getting pre and post. I moved to Denver, Colorado, and I worked for the Colorado Avalanche. And it was a kind of thing where because I was never considered a threat, I wasn't the guy trying to take over for the play by play guy. So I was getting gigs that were in my comfort zone. And eventually, and I'm just going fast because I don't want to usurp your whole podcast. Um, but I lived in Denver for 3 years. My second year, the Denver Broncos, which was a team I covered, won Super Bowl 32. And so my name was getting out there because of being on covering a good team. And the best part about that was it turned into a job in Seattle. I moved from Denver to Seattle in 1998. And I lived in Seattle for 4 years, and I covered the Mariners. That's when I kind of really got into baseball. I had done the minor league baseball. I'd covered the Rockies, but the Mariners was my thing. The Mariners made the playoffs in 2000, and Major League Baseball was launching their own radio network. And I traveled to New York with the Mariners and I had grown up in New Jersey, and I met the folks at MLB, and they were super nice. They were great, but I am a firm believer that I got a chance to hang out with those guys and get to know them. I do not think that when they were expanding MLB radio, they would have just said, "Oh, let's hire that guy out in Seattle." Like that's not who I am. I don't have that booming voice, to do it. But I sat with them for like 4 hours during Game 4 of the ALCS, and so I wound up getting hired by Major League Baseball. I worked there for 8 years, but there I got to see where all the bodies are buried. I learned so much about the sport. I saw the inner workings of it. I wound up parlaying that. In '09, I worked for SiriusXM, and then I started working for ESPN. I did Baseball Tonight. I wound up working for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2011 and your beloved New York Mets in 2014. And then in 2015, I hooked on with, and I started my podcast. In 2016, I started hooked on with iHeart. It was originally supposed to be on the iconic radio station WCBS 880. Because the radio industry is just falling apart and crumbling before our very eyes, Zach, you and I have talked about that in the past. Um, I was taken off of CBS 880. WCBS doesn't even exist anymore, but I stay with iHeart and I still work there. That's kind of that plus my podcast, and I teach a couple of courses at a college.
Yeah. So speaking on your podcast, just maybe give the viewers a little bit of how it got started and how it all came to be. Because you
Well,
got like
the
500
credit
episodes now
the
too.
credit of it goes to the guys at Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball was very, very pioneering. It's funny. Their sport is for old fogies, but their tech is incredible. MLB.com is one of the most forward-thinking companies ever. And in 2003, I was doing a radio show with a guy named Daryl Hamilton. He played for the Mets. He played for the Brewers, the Giants, the Texas Rangers, the Colorado Rockies. He played for a bunch of teams. Played 13 years in the majors and retired in 2001. And then in 2003, got partnered with me. And Daryl and I did a radio show. And at the end of the '03 season, when the Marlins, you remember Josh Beckett shut out the Yankees, Matthew? Just want to make sure you remember your history there. Um, the there was a meeting, and it was this big long table, and there were like 30 people there. And if I knew who suggested it, I would give them proper credit. But someone had an idea to take portions of our radio show and edit together as an MP3 and replace the listen live link on MLB.com with this download and instructions on how to get this MP3 on this hot new device, the iPod.
Yeah.
We had been doing a podcast before the word podcast was a word. And I always joke, and Zach, you've heard me say, I don't ever proclaim to be the greatest podcaster or the best at anything. I am the oldest podcaster there is because we were doing it before it was even a thing. My role in podcasting then, when I was at ESPN, I started hosting their podcast, and you could tell that this was a growing space. It was something, and I was learning the inner workings of it because I was working doing podcasts that weren't mine. Baseball owned that podcast. ESPN owned that podcast, and in 2015, I was offered this opportunity to create my own. And I was intrigued by it, but really what I wanted to do was recreate the radio show. That radio show with myself and Daryl was the most fun I've ever had doing anything. And I still to this day say that show is as good as anything I've ever been a part of. So my idea was get the band back together again, get Daryl and I to do a show, and we wouldn't have the filter of we'd be working for baseball. We could do it about anything we wanted, and that was the idea. Daryl was in. He just wanted to clear. He had just gotten hired by MLB Network, and he just wanted to make sure he didn't get in trouble. That was a big. He was very fearful that he was going to say something offensive and then get canceled. And so we made an arrangement in June of 2015. We were going to set up our podcast, and tragically, Daryl was killed in a murder suicide. And you can Google it, Daryl Hamilton. You can see the story. But it was a life changing event, and he was my best friend. Still to this day, I'll always say, I lost my best friend that day. Obviously, the podcast was back burner, but months went by, and what I had learned was at that time in 2015, kids just understand that there was once a time when social media was nice and it was fun. And Twitter was the greatest thing in the world. And the amount of outpouring that I received from listeners, from athletes, from celebrities, from just people uh, reaching out, offering condolences for Daryl was just overwhelming. So when I got approached about a podcast, I said the only thing I'd want to do is talk to my friends. And my mother at the time was obsessed with the game Words with Friends. So I named it Sports with Friends. And that was just what it was. And luckily, I was very, very lucky. Eli Manning is a guy I've known for a long time. And I'm not trying to be name droppy, but you asked about the podcast.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
Eli Manning knew the story of Daryl, and he was still playing back then. And it was in the off season, and he offered to be the first guest, and that was very cool. And then once that happened, we started to get listeners, and it just grew, exponentially. It's been 10 years, and you said you had your 50th. I have my 500th coming up in a couple of weeks. And yeah, I'm very excited to have that. I can tell you, Sean McDonough is going to be our 500th
Mm.
guest. So that's going to be my plan. And we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I gotta say, Seth, every time I heard that story once before, as we've talked about it in the past, and this is the second time heard it, and every time I hear it, even though it's only been two times, it's just struck me
It's a
a
crazy
fascinating. It's
story.
just it's crazy to think about how you guys were literally about to start the podcast together, and then just tragedy hits. It's weird how the world works sometimes.
Yep.
And me and Matt, I wasn't really planning to bring this up on the pod, but me and Matt, we've experienced something similar. We weren't as close to the person, but it was a tragedy because she went to our middle school,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
we knew her personally. She just got killed last week.
Like it
oh,
last week.
I'm
Last
so
week.
sorry.
I think it was an NJ transit accident.
Yikes.
We don't know what happened to her, but she was only 20. Her name, I don't know if I'm gonna name drop her name, but her name's Arfa. Um,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
yeah, and she just got tragically killed. And it just struck home because it got so close to home with this is a
Of
person we went
course.
to school with.
Yeah.
So yeah, that tragedy sucks, but you know, just to get on to some lighter topics, some lighter news. Um, Covering the Super Bowl with the Broncos, just
Yeah.
how interesting was that? Getting to get all that experience, talk to the players, cover the whole game. How was that?
It was pretty awesome. The year before they were expected to go to the Super Bowl. That was the year they lost to Jacksonville in the first round of the playoffs, and the next year they weren't as good. That year they had lost, I want to say 4 or 5. They were either 12-4 or 11-5, and people didn't think they were going to make it. They had changed the uniforms. That was a big deal. That was a big thing, and the players by that point, that was my second year covering them, so I knew a lot of the guys. There was this crazy incident, I want to say like week 13 or week 14, when Bill Romanowski, a defensive player, spit on JJ Stokes, who was a player for the 49ers, and he was black. And I remember Shannon Sharp kicked all the reporters out of the locker room, and he put Bill Romanowski on a chair in the middle of the clubhouse, or no, it's not a clubhouse, a locker room. And he told all the players, he said, say anything you want about this guy. Don't physically assault him, but say anything you want. And supposedly it got really, really nasty. And but they got it out of their system, and they I don't think they lost after that. It was just this crazy run. It was really neat, and the Broncos were very cool because I did not have a credential for the Super Bowl because no one thought they were going. And the NFL, the Broncos petitioned the NFL to get me a credential to go to San Diego. And I got it, and it was awesome. And then in the fourth quarter, they let the beat reporters go down on the field. So there's that famous scene in Super Bowl 32 when Terrell Davis has a migraine and he can't see. Like his vision is impaired. And I heard Mike Shanahan go over to Terrell Davis and said, I need you to go in on this play. And he goes, but coach, I can't see. He goes, you don't need to. And he was a decoy. And he goes in, and if you ever watch the NFL films, it's very grainy, but you can see a little me, like in the
Oh
background.
yeah?
Like, yeah, it's very like you can't make it out. Like no one would know it's me, but I know because I remember what I was wearing that day. And yeah, it was super fun. And this is a video podcast, right?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
hold on.
I told you. I told you. I I love hearing his stories. It's actually mind blowing.
I know. I can't wait. From everything I've heard, we got a couple more topics, some stories I want to hear. I'm
We
excited.
got a lot of good topics ahead just to keep this rolling
Yeah.
along too. Yeah.
All right, so that night they win the Super Bowl, and the hotel, the team hotel, they rented out the ballroom, and they had the "We won the Super Bowl" party, and we got invited. And so we go into this room and everyone's partying and it's insane. And the coach, Shanahan, Mike Shanahan, stands up on a dais and is going to do a toast. And everyone grabs a glass with champagne in it. And if you can see, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but the glass is engraved with the Super Bowl logo.
Wow.
And I looked at it and I remember, and I said then, I go, this is coming home with me. Like this, and I put it in my jacket, and I remember like just hoping it didn't get smashed, you know. And yeah, I still have it to this day. It hangs in my living room. Just one of the amazing souvenirs from that Super Bowl. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. That Super Bowl was a freaking blast.
Now, there's one thing that I would love for you to tell before we get on to other like baseball news. I would love for you to tell this on the podcast. Just how you got an in with the players.
Oh, the Madden story.
Yeah, yeah. I love that story.
This is fun. So the first year, the year they lost to Jacksonville, the first year, that was the first time I had called. I had covered a NFL team. That was the first time I was in an NFL practice, an NFL game. I was 23. I didn't know a soul, and I was nervous as can be. I was like shaking. These guys were huge. John Elway was already a Hall of Famer at that point. He was 20 years older than me, and he wasn't giving me the time of day. Like it was just an insane time. And I remember in the beginning, I didn't ask any questions of any players. Anytime it was a scrum, I would put my microphone in, and that's how I was getting interviews. So like the station was getting the sound that they needed, but I was not. I was nervous. And one day, it was on a Wednesday. I remember it was on a Wednesday because Wednesday's the big day where the locker room's open for an extended time in the NFL. And I overheard two of the linemen. This guy Alfred Williams, he number 91. He was talking with a bunch of guys about the video game Madden Football. And Madden Football was kind of new at that point. Like it was I think it was Madden 98 was the game that we were playing. And it was only like the fifth or sixth version. I'm watching a documentary about Madden Football, and I learned when they got to Madden 98, I was like, that's when I started playing. And I very meekly went over to them and I said, "Excuse me, are you guys talking about the video game?" And they're like, "Yeah, you played a video game?" And I was like, "Yeah, I play the video game." And we started talking, and the next thing you know, we learned that there was a way. We were on dial-up internet, but there was a way you could dial in from one computer to another and play virtually. And we started doing that. And we were like, "This is awesome. This works. Like we could totally do this. We could play this." And we did it throughout that season. But then the next season, during training camp, we had this idea. There was a day where it rained and nobody was practicing. Like practice was canceled. We were all just sitting around the dormitory where the players were staying, and we decided to start a league. We started a Madden football league with like 5 players. It was like two other reporters plus me, so three media people, and then a bunch of officials, like the people that worked for the team, and we were all in it. And what you did was you got your assignment where you had to play so and so, and you had 5 days to do it, and then you had to report your results. That was the because we could. It wasn't like a league in the game. We made the league. And I remember we used to take a notebook and write the standings. And the one rule was no Broncos players could be the Broncos. That was the rule. And yeah, we played this whole league. And then the Broncos made this run. They made this amazing run. And the irony was we had to delay our championship because they went to the Super Bowl. And it was really, really fun. And the epilogue of that story is after they won the Super Bowl, they won Super Bowl 32, they had a parade. And Alfred organized it so that everyone in the Madden League could be on his float. So I was 24 at this point, and I was in a float in a parade in downtown Denver. It was one of the craziest experiences, and I wish I could say it was about my broadcasting acumen. It wasn't. It was just luck and great people. They those guys were awesome, and I stay in social media. I stay in touch with some of those guys, but they were awesome. Tyrone Braxton was in it. I don't know if any of these players ring a bell, but yeah, they were super 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 fun.
Yeah. I can't believe that Madden was the thing.
Madden.
Of all things to get you an in and to get you on that float, it was Madden
That's
I
and
know.
in
amazing.
the league.
Yeah, and it was I'm telling the story, but it was a year and a half in between that. Like we had been doing it for a while. So like when the thing with the parade happened, it wasn't like this shocking thing. I was surprised, but it was we had been playing like for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Like we knew at that point, but it was very cool. And then one of the calls I made to that Seattle radio station, they called my cell phone from the float, and I did like a 10-minute hit on a Seattle radio station from the float. And I told that, a very shortened version of that story. But that was one of the things that kind of got me the Seattle job.
Yeah. That's crazy. It still just blows my mind.
It's a fun one.
I do want to mention as a Yankee fan, I've heard that you've had some Susan Waldman encounters or some stories. If there's any that you would like to share, I personally would love to hear them, and
Oh,
I'm
she's
sure some
she's an
people would
icon.
know.
She's a
Yeah.
she's an absolute icon. I think it's very cool this year that you're going to see a good friend of mine, Dave Sims, is going to be the new
Yeah.
Yankee radio announcer. Great
Hmm.
dude, really, really good guy. Um, Super. He was at MLB when when that year that in 2000 when I came with the Mariners. And he was the guy that introduced me to all the people. He's single-handedly responsible for the existence of my children. I mean, he was amazing. Susan is a pioneer. The great Susan Waldman story that I heard a long time ago, she validated it, is in the late 80s when the fan had just started. She was a beat reporter for the Yankees. So she traveled with the Yankees, and she's in Toronto at the old exhibition stadium. And this guy on the Blue Jays hits two home runs. His name was George Bell. Still is. He's still alive. And he was a dick. And he hits two home runs. So she logically goes down to the clubhouse and tries to interview George Bell about the two home runs, and he berates her. Uh, you know, bitch, get out of the clubhouse. Like women don't belong in here. There are naked men in here. Like get out. It's Spanish. He spoke Spanish, and he was just an asshole. And he and it was kind of a scene. And they wanted to see if they could make her cry, and she stood her ground. And Jesse Barfield, who was a player that I got a chance to know. He was the hitting coach of the Mariners when I was there, so I got a chance to know them. And I heard this story a second time. He stood up in front of all his teammates and said, "Excuse me, miss." And I said, "I didn't hit two home runs, but I did have an RBI single, and you can interview me anytime." And she did. And it's this amazing story. She's a special, special, special lady. She got very lucky in that George Steinbrenner loved her, and before he got sick, hired her to do the radio. And no radio teams last this long as they did, but nobody ever wanted to go against George's wishes. And so she got the job forever, and she has it for life. And that's great. I'm not knocking it. It's very different from how things are done in any broadcast situation. But yeah, she calls the games, and she does the analysis, and for someone who didn't play, she does a great job. She's a an icon, a pioneer, a Hall of Famer, whatever. Hopefully she gets into the broadcasting wing of the Hall of Fame. That would
Hmm.
be something that I would hope she does.
Yeah, she's an absolute legend. She's loved by Yankee fans like all around the world, all around the country, myself included. So it's really just really fun to just listen to like a story about that, like standing your ground and all that. Zach, you wanna? I know this one this might be all
Yeah,
you.
so as I mentioned to you before we hopped on,
Mhm.
Seth, I do want to talk about your time in with the Mets in 2014.
Hmm.
Um, if there's a favorite memory you could share or a good
Oh, the
moment,
good story? I'll
yeah,
tell the
yeah,
good story,
yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. Tell the good story.
Well, look, that year I had signed a 2-year deal to work for the Mets, and that year, 2014, my kids were 6 and 3, and I was missing a lot of their firsts. Just the first day of schools, and things like that, and it was hard. I will say, just to call it what it is, the road trips were awesome. They were super fun. You flew on chartered planes, stayed in 5-star hotels. It was a layup. The thing that I hated was schlepping from goddamn New Jersey to Queens every day for the homestands. If they would have like a 10-game homestand, it was torture. By like game 8, I hated it. Um, but my favorite story is this is so silly. Jacob DeGrom babysat my kid. Um, so so the story goes, my daughter's born in August, and it was her birthday, and they missed me just like I missed it. The whole experience was very hard, but what she wanted for her birthday was she wanted to go to a game with me, and so we picked a Sunday afternoon that I would take her, and I had mapped it out. I mapped out the entire day to make sure that I could be with her. I got permission from the Mets to keep her in the booth. I got permission from the clubhouse to let her in the clubhouse. Like I had her for, and the only thing I could not bring her to was the 5 minutes that I needed to interview Terry Collins for the pregame show. And so, because this is how I am as a father, I found this one woman who was in security. They were two security guards that guarded the Mets clubhouse, and one was a woman. And I went up to her and I explained the situation, and I said, for 5 minutes, can you watch my daughter? And she was fine. She was fine. So now the day comes, and I'm with her, and I'm bringing her everywhere. And I have pictures of her sitting in the Mets press conference room. I have all these adorable pictures of her, when she was 6. And all of a sudden, some idiot tries to break into one of the gates at Citi Field, and they get an all hands on deck. They get an announcement. This is like 5 minutes before I'm supposed to interview Terry Collins, and they go, all security personnel report to gate whatever the hell. And she's she looked at me and she's like, I'm sorry. And she takes off. And now I have this kid and I can't leave her. And it's not that I thought somebody was going to kidnap her. She'd be scared. So I couldn't leave her. I didn't want her to cry. I That's where my stress was. Like my stress was not, I didn't think she was unsafe, but I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? And I didn't know who to ask. And all of a sudden, Jacob DeGrom, who was in his rookie year that year, let's remember he had the long hair,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
it's a young Jacob DeGrom.
he saw this whole thing come down, and he just goes, "I'll watch her." And I went, "For real?" And I went to my little daughter and I said, "You see this guy?" I said, "He's gonna play with you." And she's like, "Okay." And they played with a little ball and they did something. I don't know. I wasn't there. And I left my daughter with Jacob DeGrom, and I'm like, "What could happen? Whatever it would be in the news. Like, what could
Yeah,
happen?" And so I went off and I did the Terry Collins report or pregame, whatever we did. I came back, she was there, and he went off to go, do whatever. He wasn't pitching that day, but yeah. So the long and short of it is Jacob Degrom babysat my kid.
that is
That's
unbelievable. I
incredible.
was not
Yeah.
when I had this question written down. I did wasn't expecting that in the slightest. I
Yeah,
mean
that's my
that's a
favorite. Yeah, my
that's a
favorite
young
thing.
Jacob DeGrom too. That's
Yeah,
that's
that
rookie
that
Jacob
and
DeGrom.
yeah, there's a couple of stories I can't tell on your podcast, but yeah, after class we can tell those stories. But yeah,
Okay,
those that's my favorite Mets story of all time. Oh,
that's
the other one
insane.
was the other one was Do you remember what was his name? He was a relief pitcher.
Uh,
Um,
Jerry's
Vic
Familia?
Black.
Oh, okay.
Remember Vic Black? Uh,
Um, I don't know if I remember Vic Black.
Vic Black, and then there was a pitcher, a veteran pitcher named Dave Island, and he was close to my age,
Okay.
because I was 40 at that point, and we hit it off, and we were all Marvel fans, and Guardians of the Galaxy was coming out, the first one, and so the three of us decided we were going to go see Guardians of the Galaxy. We had a night game. I think it was in Milwaukee. Again, the road trips were fun, and we go to see Guardians of the Galaxy. And if you remember the opening scene of Guardians of the Galaxy, it's a flashback scene to when Peter Quill, the main character of Guardians, he's a kid, and
Mhm.
the screen flashes the number 1988, and Vic Black, who's sitting next to me, just goes, "Oh, cool! I was born." And I went, "You asshole!" I was like, I was 14. So, yeah, those are my two favorite stories with the Mets.
Yeah, that again, I was not expecting you to say Jacob DeGrom watched your kid. Um,
Yeah, Jacob
were
DeGrom babysat my kid,
were
100%.
you there too for the 2015 World Series run? Or
It was ironic. I had left the team, and I hooked on with NBC Sports. Um, yeah, we had a pretty nasty divorce in like I want to say November of 2014. We kind of split up, and I was looking for work, and NBC Sports was doing this thing, NBC Sports Radio, and they had hired me, and they wanted me to cover it, and I was like, "Ay, I have to go all the way to Citi Field." Uh, And I went to the World Series, and the one person I didn't want to see was Jeff Wilpon. And I remember my friends were like, "Oh, come on, there's going to be 60,000 people there. Like it's the World Series. Just don't worry about it. You won't see him." And he was standing in the press entrance. I was like, "Oh my god!" I'm like, I'm not even here for 10 seconds. But it's funny at Citi Field they have. I remember the people, the stadium workers, and the traveling guys, the people on the that you traveled, and you had the same flight attendants assigned to the plane. So like I knew them. They're all on my Facebook. It just there were some really really great people. It was a really cool. Steve Gelbs is a good friend of mine. He was wonderful. Josh Lewin is an amazing dude. Chris Majkowski, the on-site producer, one of my favorite episodes of Sports with Friends during COVID. We had him on because he had so many stories from being with the Mets for 25 years. Yeah, there were some wonderful wonderful people, but my life is better off without
yeah, yeah, better off to better things, and your podcast and everything's going pretty good. I would
Mhm.
have to say, right?
it was funny. Daryl and I in 2014 were traveling the country. He worked for the Brewers, and I worked for the Mets, and so we were crisscrossing, and we were comparing notes all the time, and we were comparing stories. So like there were times when the Brewers played whoever the Mets were going to play next, and he was like telling me stuff from those games, and I had these references that I was using. It was pretty amazing. So that year, that's where we had the idea, like we could tell the stories of our travels was in the podcast because in 2015 that was the idea. 2015 he left the Brewers and I left the Mets.
Yeah, that's crazy. And you know what, too, Maddie, I know you're dying to
Yeah.
hear some of these Mariner stories.
Yeah.
We've talked about the Mariners in the past and your relationship with Griffey.
Oh,
Um, but yeah, Maddie, go ahead,
Yeah.
ask away.
Zach has obviously told me a lot about you, and everything that I've heard today, like from this podcast, is just better than anything
oh,
Zach.
good.
It's like words cannot describe. Like he told me you have some great stories, and these have been phenomenal.
Oh,
And
good. Well, I brought my A game today.
yeah,
100% you
for
did, yeah.
the 50th, I'm super glad. We're having a lot of
Yes,
fun.
50th episode. Yep.
So I love Ken Griffey. Zach has told me that, you have a pretty good friendship with Griffey, and you've
Yeah.
mentioned, your time in Seattle. So I would personally love for you to go in depth with all that. I just think that would be so awesome to hear about.
My 50th episode of Sports with Friends, I did a podcast on the Drone Racing League. That was not a massive episode. My 50th was not one, but I had Carlos Beltran, then of the Yankees, on episode 53.
Oh wow.
So
Wow.
that was cool. Oh, and Bryce Harper did episode 54. Cool. All right.
Wow.
All right. Griffey. So when I got to the Mariners in 98, I got there in July of 98. He had an issue with the radio station that I was just hired by. And one of the key moments with me and Griffey, I went up to him, and don't forget, I'm confident now. I just had the Bronco experience, and the Rockies. Dante Bichette was a guy that I covered, and Eric Young Sr. and Larry Walker. I covered Larry Walker's MVP year. So I was like, "Who's this punk? Like what's his deal?" And I just went up to him and I said, "Look, you are more than welcome to hate me." I said, "There are plenty of people who do." I said, "But if you're going to hate me, you're going to know me." And he didn't really say anything that time, but it triggered with him. They went on the road. In the beginning, I didn't travel. I only traveled with the Mariners to key series. Like, we didn't go on every road trip. It wasn't like the other jobs. And I remember they left, and then they came back, and it was in the old Kingdom, which was a disgusting building. And I remember we were standing there. This is 98. So this is the year McGuire and Sosa are in the home run chase. And Griffey had 58 that year. And, it was a three-way race, and then he kind of dropped off. I remember taking batting practice with the hat backwards, and he was launching these bombs. And we would watch, just to watch. And I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think anything. And the Kingdom did not have a fancy scoreboard. It didn't have like these fancy scoreboards that stadiums have now. So when they played music, they didn't play the videos. They would just play music. And Jennifer Lopez, you remember Jennifer Lopez? She's a singer. I mean, you know who Jennifer Lopez
Mhm.
is, but she's a singer. And the first song, she it's called "If You Had My Love," and there's a clear reason I know that. I encourage all your listeners or viewers to go watch that video. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But anyway, that video. And Griffey, he's done hitting, and he walks down the third base line, and I'm standing there with two other reporters, and we're just standing there, like minding our own business. And he looks right at me, and he goes, "This song without the video, pointless."
Yeah.
And I went, "What?" I went, "Huh?" And yeah, so that's how we hit it off. We hit it off a lot. He was really really fun. He found out I was a big Prince fan, and he was a big Prince fan, so we had that in common. And we talked a lot. There's a couple of videos when I was at MLB. When I got the job at MLB, the first day that we were in spring training, we went to the Reds, and he was there, and he didn't do interviews. And I was like, I'll get him. And I got him. And the people, it was my first day at MLB, and I just remember like them all being very impressed. They were like, "Wow, you can get this? Like,
Yeah.
great." Um, yeah, he was a super cool guy. He to this day we stay in touch. He's done Sports with Friends twice, I want to say. At the Hall of Fame, when he got elected to the Hall of Fame, there was a press conference in Manhattan, and all the Hall of Famers were put off in this room, and he says, "I didn't know this, but he had told the Hall of Fame that I got the first interview." And so the Hall of Fame guy comes over and goes, "Yeah, can you go here? You're going to talk to him." And I go up to talk to him, and then he yells, he goes, "No, I said I won't talk to him. I said no talking to him." Like that's what and he did it in front of like hundreds of people, and I was like, "Oh my god." Um, One time when he was with the Reds, um, these guys went to do a story on him, or not on him, but they were doing something on the Reds, and they tried to name drop me to get him to talk to them. And in the camera, and I have it on YouTube. I can send you guys the link.
Mhm.
He can you curse on this podcast?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Go for it.
So there's a video of Ken Griffey Jr. in a Reds uniform going, Seth, I fucking made you. You'd be nothing without me. He did it. And then like they put it out and they circulated it around the league, and all the folks at MLB saw this video. And I told him that if he ever got elected to the Hall of Fame, I was putting that on YouTube. And I did. But yeah.
Yeah, your stories with Griffey go even deeper
That's
than that. I know that for sure.
He's super fun. Yeah, he's super good
Um,
dude.
what another one I would love for you to mention briefly or quickly is the story about you in the movie theater with Griffey.
Oh,
And then when he
making
Yep,
the trade. Okay.
yep.
So Ken Griffey Jr. was in a contract negotiation, and he wound up getting traded to the Reds. But his agent had this idea. He wanted to prove to the Mariners just how important he was to the team, and he thought that it would get the team to start showing a little more respect in the way they were negotiating. So his agent concocted this idea, and they were going to ask me to make up a trade rumor. And the so so the story goes is episode 1 Star Wars the Phantom Menace had come out, and we, we wanted to see it, and we were on the line waiting to go to see this movie. And my friend Dave and my friend Dave, I mean, if you're gonna name drop, he's a great dude. He does afternoon drive in Seattle at KJR. His name is he does the Softy Show, and Dave Mahler is his name, and he's a great guy. Dave and I were standing on this line, and these two kids that were near us had lightsabers that made the noise, you know, vroom,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
vroom, vroom. So my idiot friend, he's nuts. He says, "You want to see two grown men fight?" And they're like, "Yeah." So we take their lightsabers and we start going at it, and we're doing it. And my cell phone, and you got to understand, this is 1999. Cell phones were not these.
Mhm.
They were clunky and big. And I just remember I had this giant flip phone in my pocket, and all of a sudden the phone started ringing. And like you didn't get calls like people get calls now. And I was like, hold on, hold on, hold on. And I answered the phone, and it was Ken Griffey Jr. He had called the radio station and got my number. And he calls me, and he's like, "It's me." And I'm like, "Me who?" And he's like, "It's me." And he's like, "It's Griff." That was what he called himself. And he's like, "It's Griff." And I'm like, "Bullshit. No way." And he's like, "It's me, motherfucker." And then I go, "Hold on, this is Ken Griffey Jr." And Dave, who worked at the radio station, was in the media. He goes, "Baloney," and he starts pounding me in the back because now I put the lightsaber down. I wasn't defending myself, and he's pounding me. Going, "You idiot! You idiot!" And then he just goes on the phone call. He says, "A team source is telling you that I'm getting traded to the Braves, the Atlanta Braves." And I went, "What?" And I go, "Who's the team source?" And he's like, "Me." And I was like, "Oh." And I quickly caught on to what I was doing, and I had to make a judgment call because I knew it was baloney, but I could endear myself to him and his agent forever if I report this. So we did see the movie, and because again, there was no social media, it wasn't that urgent. Nobody was going to have this beforehand. And after the movie, I remember we went to the radio station and we broke into whatever coverage was, whatever show was on. And I said, a team source is telling me that the Mariners are going to are close to trading Ken Griffey Jr. to the Atlanta Braves. And it caused a firestorm. Like people went bananas. No, you can't do this. You can't do this. And that's exactly what his agent was going for. And so, yes, I made up a trade rumor.
unbelievable,
That's
unbelievable.
That's a
It's
fun one.
the,
That's a fun
some
one.
of the stories you got, man. I gotta say, are just so. I just find them so fascinating, and that specific Griffey story is just one that personally will stick with me too, for the upcoming future. Like that's just
It was a fun.
crazy,
Yeah.
crazy.
We
Um,
told that story a lot in Cooperstown when he got into the Hall of Fame. That was the last time I went up to the Hall of Fame, and when he got in, I was telling that story to anybody who would listen.
how was that, by the way, the Hall of Fame?
Hmm.
Because you went for his induction ceremony, right?
Yeah, yeah. I want to say I've been 3 or 4 times. They're really wonderful people. The guy who's the president of the Hall of Fame now is a guy named Josh. He worked with me at MLB.com. He was a great guy, Josh Rowich. He's the new president of the Hall. He's not new. It's been like 5 years by now. But he was a great guy. And another guy before him, Jeff Adelson, dear friend of mine. He was the president beforehand. So the people are super nice. It's just that the induction ceremony, it's like 1,000 degrees, and there's hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of people, and it's just this little community gets overwhelmed, and I cannot see myself going back. I just
Yeah,
there's nobody else. Um, yeah, there's nobody else. I mean, my joke about baseball, because I don't cover baseball anymore, is the last player that I had an adult beverage with was David Wright. Once David Wright retired, that was the end. There's not a person. And now, I hate to say it, and Zach, I say this to you guys, like, um, when I see my students, I feel old. Like I see them and I'm like, oh my god, I remember being in college. Like I can remember college feels like it was yesterday. Well, seeing athletes, they look like children. Jack Hughes looks like he could babysit for my kids.
Yeah.
Like he looks like a boy. He looks like a little kid. There's a guy I follow the English Premier League, and there's this player Ethan Waneri. He's 17. He's 17, and he's on the first team for Arsenal. Like that's insane. He's seven. My kid is 16, and she works at a dance studio. This guy's in the Premier League. I can't get over. I can't get over it. And what things like that make you feel old. Like I don't wake up every day going, oh, woe is me. I'm old. I'm not old, but when I see athletes today, I can't relate to today's athletes.
yeah, yeah. That's crazy. And just to wrap up things,
Yes.
I would love to ask you this. I know we've talked about this. But just to get it on the pod, if you could cover any MLB team in today's day and age, who would it be and why?
Can I pass?
Yeah, you could pass, but
I made the choice. I made the choice a couple of years ago. I don't cover it anymore. I
yeah.
covered the World Series last year for iHeart, and it was fine. I don't relate to it anymore. I do miss a lot of the people. Um, in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to have a couple of baseball guests on the podcast, just because I do miss the relationships. Dusty Baker gave the eulogy at Daryl's memorial, and he told me we had lunch. I want to say like 6 months after he passed, and we went, I went to see him when he was the manager of the Nationals, and he said, the thing with sports, he said, are the people, and that I miss. I do miss, being there. Like for example, I'm happy for Dave Sims, so maybe I'll go out to Yankee Stadium and just, to see Dave Sims and, congratulate him in person or something like that. Like I don't see it. My bucket list is very, very small at this point. My goals, I need to get to London. I need to see a Premier League game in person because this is my fourth year watching them, and I need to experience the what that is, and I want to learn all the songs that the fans sing. The fans constantly are singing songs, and I don't know what they are. I know the melodies, but I can't make out the words. So I wanna go to a game, and I want to see my beloved New Jersey Devils win the championship with my children. I do not want to be on FaceTime with them when the Devils win the championship. I saw the
Mhm.
Devils win 3 championships, growing up, and I want to experience that with them. And my daughter is a junior in high school, and she's a bigger fan than I was when I was a kid. And I need to see the Devils win with her. I need to be in her presence, you know, whether it's at the game or on TV. I need to be next to my little one when my team wins a championship again. That's my bucket list. That's what I want next.
That's how I feel. That's the
That,
exact same way I feel
hmm
with the Mets. I want to be right next to my dad. If
Yeah.
when and
Same
if
with
they
me.
win the World
Hmm
Series, I
Yeah,
want
I
to be right
lost.
next to them.
Yeah, I lost both my parents in the last 3 years, and
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. But yeah, so when you have kids, it's the fact that my daughter is wants to do it. Like she loves the team, and that just makes my world. You know, like I'm raising them right.
Yeah. Maddie, I know you
hmm
got one more in the chamber. Go
Yeah.
ahead, ask
I
away.
I know really short on time, so just
Yeah.
really quickly, if you could give any advice to anyone out there that just wants to do what you did as a career, go down that path, what would be the one little advice you would give them?
Well, it's a different world now. I mean, there's all different platforms. What I would say is if your goal is to be on the air, then do things like this, reps.
Hmm
Reps are good, and be able to compartmentalize your best work and be able to present it to potential employers. Podcasts, videos, student stations, whatever it is, um, just get reps. You need the reps. You know, when I was in college, we did the Syracuse University football and basketball, and we also did lacrosse. And I know a ton of lacrosse. You know, like you study it, and what that was reps. You know that's what you need, and eventually you will get is the confidence. I think the hardest part is it's a crowded space, so it's harder. And I think players are harder to connect to than it was. Um, I don't think I did anything spectacular to develop the relationships, but I earned trust, and it's important to do that. And I think with today's day and age, I think like the New York Knicks, their two best players have a podcast. Why would they talk to
hmm
anyone? Other than themselves. It's a different world, and it's a complicated space. But you know, it's funny. Athletes always say, older athletes always say they were born at the wrong time because the money is so much bigger now. Well, it's the same thing. Like I was born in a time when you could get to know players, and you could get to know, and Jacob DeGrom could babysit your kids. Like stuff like that could happen. And I don't know how much that can happen next, but I do know there are opportunities, and there's always new things coming up, and it's just a matter of getting the reps.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Seth. We really appreciate you coming on.
we really do. Yeah.
I have to say, probably our best podcast we've ever done.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
I'm
guess
not
the
even,
first 49 are not listenable then.
I'm not even joking. But we would love to have you back on
Sure.
down the line and talk like current day baseball with you
Yeah.
too.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And guys, make sure to check out Sports with Friends. It's on
Yes.
Spotify, and is it on Apple Music or anything else?
Apple and
Apple Music?
anywhere
Okay.
you can
We'll
find a
we'll link it.
podcast,
We'll
check it
link it.
out.
Hmm
Yeah, we'll link it when the pod goes up. But yeah, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you guys for tuning in to episode 50, and we will see you guys next week for episode 51.